we've all heard the saying that words speak louder than, or actions speak louder than words. Actions speak louder than words. You've heard it, right? Actions speak louder than words. And I think it's true, especially when it comes to when we meet new people. That new neighbor moves in, and you know that they can say anything to kind of, get in on your good side, but it's their actions that you're really looking at to know who they are. That is true. But when it comes to your inner circle of relationships, family relationships, the people that you would consider your very best friends, actions and words both speak with equal weight, with equal loudness, I believe, because words are powerful. And the more intimate the relationship is, the weightier that those words become. They have a greater capacity to leave a mark for good or bad. The words that we use in those inner circles of relationships, they can wound deeply or bring great healing. They can inspire or they can undermine. They can discourage. They can wound. Words in those relationships are powerful. In fact, words in those inner circle relationships are so powerful that even words that are left unsaid have the potential to affect the trajectory of a person's life. Like, I've never had anyone quote to me what a neighbor or coworker never said. Right? You get it? Never had anybody quote to me what a coworker or neighbor never said. But I've had lots of people, students, young people, single people, married people, older adults, tell me, sometimes with tears in their eyes, a phrase that they never heard their father say, or a phrase that they really, really wish that their mother would have said. And you know the phrases. I'm proud of you. They never heard it said. I treasure you. You bring me joy. The big one, I love you. That's how powerful words are. Even unspoken words have the potential to impact the trajectory of somebody's life. Have you ever been personally crushed by someone's words? Now, I don't want to dredge up a whole bunch of ugly stuff here, but let's maybe make it a little bit lighter. I'll tell you about mine, high school. Let's all go back to high school for a minute. Here's my high school experience, or one of them. She says, Aaron, let's just be friends. And I'm like, no, I don't want to just be friends. And she's like, I thought of you more as a brother. And I'm like, I don't want to be your brother. I want to play kissy face with you. Anybody remember that? I obviously do. And she was trying to let me down easy and use words that were kind to say, but they crushed me. It's like my heart being ripped out of my body. And again, our lives have been shaped by words spoken to us, at us, over us, about us. They shaped our childhood. They shaped or misshaped our marriages. They undermined a marriage or rebuilt or built a marriage. They impact our confidence. The words spoken to us actually have impacted or determined to some extent who we see in the mirror every day. It made me think of when I was about 8 years old. I'm guessing about 8. Seems like my whole childhood happened when I was 8. I don't know the exact ages, but I'm assuming about 8. And when we would go to church, both my parents sang in the choir. So oftentimes my parents had to get a wrangler for me, because I was Aaron the Destroyer, right? I was that kid, so you couldn't leave me alone in the church. So they would find some kind, unsuspecting person who would say, oh yeah, I'll sit with Aaron in church today. So I was standing there with this very kind lady, and we're in one of the common areas before going into church, standing there with this kind lady, and I'm about this tall, and she's this tall, and she's talking to one of her friends who comes over, and the woman says, like, hey, how do you like my date for church today? And the other woman, the first words out of her mouth were, he needs a haircut. And I hear this, and it hit me in two ways. One, it hit me because, oh my gosh, I'm suddenly very self-conscious. And number two, I don't know how she said it or what it was that she said, around it, but I felt like she thought my family couldn't afford a haircut. So I thought it was an economic thing that she was saying. Those words are imprinted in my brain. You probably have some words like that too. We'll talk more about that. The fact that words have the potential to destroy as well as build and undermine, as well as inspire, that should impact all of us. And this is good advice, what we're going to be talking about for everybody. And I got to tell you, this isn't a religious thing. This is not a Christian thing. But if you are a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, what we're talking about today is not optional. You don't get to choose this. And this isn't second-tier stuff. This is first-tier stuff. So in this series, we're drawing from some work by Andy Stanley. What we're going to do is unpack 3 dynamics that are at play in every conversation that we have, especially in the conversations that are important to us. 3 dynamics that determine what people hear regardless of what we have said. So family, friends, even to some extent coworkers and employees. So today we're going to unpack the first dynamic. But before we do that, we've got to figure out the incentive behind it. Because again, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jesus follower, this isn't optional stuff. This is part of what it means to follow Jesus. It's baked into the equation. So let's dig in. In his letter to first century Christians living in Ephesus, the city of Ephesus, the Apostle Paul, the guy that wrote a big chunk of our New Testament, the Apostle Paul reminds these new Christians about something very important. So here's what he writes, Ephesians 5, 1 and 2. He says, "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love." Now, pause. When you hear the way of love, you might go to a place like, oh, that sounds so sweet and so romantic and so cuddly, the way of love. You got to remember, we're talking about a specific kind of love here. We're talking about the Jesus kind of love, the love that Jesus modeled. So Paul makes that clear. He goes on. "Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the way of love." Here it is. "Just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us." So the kind of love Paul's talking about, the way of love, is the way of love that Jesus modeled over and over and over again. A bold kind of love, an intentional kind of love, a love that sometimes is offensive, a love that is always self-sacrificial, a kind of love that always has the other person in mind first. That kind of love. And here's why we're talking about this, because remember, you can choose to be a follower of Jesus or not. God never forces anyone to be a follower, right? You can choose. But once you choose to follow Jesus, you do not get to choose how you define what it looks like to love like Jesus loved. You do not get to define that. That is already defined for us, for you, for me. Jesus defined it and modeled it over and over again. He simply said, love others as I have loved you. And that is a sacrificial love. It's a love that's more concerned with the other person than with the self. So that's overarching. If we don't get that part, the rest doesn't make sense. So the Apostle Paul takes that overarching idea of love and applies it specifically to the words we use and the words we choose. Because the words we use, the words we choose are, in some sense, an embodiment of that practice of love. This is the way of love. This is what it sounds like. So Paul writes, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths." Now, the word unwholesome there in the original Greek, it means filthy, stinky, distasteful. It's the same word that was used for the smell of rotting fish. Don't let stinky, disgusting words come out of your mouth. All right? And what he's saying is, Paul's saying, I want you to view your mouth, use your imaginations here, view your mouth as a gate. And those thoughts that you have, you're going to have them. Those stinky thoughts, those negative thoughts, don't let them through the gate. All right? When they storm the gate, those words, when they storm the gate of your mouth, don't let them through, especially in an election year. It's not written in the text. It's implied. Don't let them through. And I'm going to bet we all struggle with this, right? There's moments when we are not good gatekeepers. So first, Paul states the negative. Don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth. Then he states the positive. But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And I want to highlight a couple of inconspicuous words in there. So look at this. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. See the two words? But only. Again, If you are not a Christian, not a Jesus follower, all this is optional. And I don't have any business telling you how to live your life. But if you are a Christian, if you are a Jesus follower, but only in the original Greek means but only. When you think about the words that come out of your mouth, be selective. Like going to a Chiefs game? Clear plastic purses only, no backpacks. Ain't nothing going out of this mouth that you can't see already. Right? Only words that are good for building others up according to their needs. Now, I think we can all grasp that. We get it. All right, yeah, Paul's right. It's hard. It's not an easy thing to do. But we have a finely crafted excuse when it comes to getting around this. And here's our finely crafted excuse. Well, I was just being honest. I was just being honest. Andy Stanley clarifies this so well. Here's what he says, and I'm quoting him. Honesty is making sure that what you say is true, but honesty is not saying everything that's true. Make sense? So when you hear yourself excusing your distasteful words with, well, I was just being honest. Remember, you weren't being honest. You were being the Bible definition is you were being a jerk. That's what you're being. But only what? But only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs. This is a place where we get to use our imaginations because he's creating a word picture. Whenever you see a word picture in Scripture, pause and then let your imagination run wild. So building up. Words are like building materials, like concrete and rebar and 2x4s and plywood and drywall. And when you leave the construction site, when you leave the conversation, and sometimes it's going to be a positive conversation and everybody feels good. Sometimes it's a negative conversation that it's important to have. Anyway, whenever you leave the construction site, the conversation, Paul says, the person on the other side of you should be built up. They should be better for it. But in order for that to happen, to ensure that my words build the person up, I have to be something first. And that is a student. I have to be a student. Now look at this verse again with a couple other inconspicuous words highlighted. Ready? Here we go. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths. Be a good gatekeeper, but only what is helpful for building others up. Create that word picture in your mind, building others up according to, here it is, their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. And this means, if I'm going to learn someone's needs, that means I have to pay attention. I have to understand that person, and it takes patience, and it takes work, and it means being quick to listen and slow to speak. Have you heard that one? That's another passage of Scripture too. Be quick to listen, slow to speak. Because Paul says the goal is to choose words and tailor words to their needs. Their needs. Their needs. And does this hit home with me? It hits home with me because most of the time I'm confident that what they need to hear is what I need to say. And I don't know how many times I've messed this up specifically with my kids. And so I've gone to them and I say to them what needs to be said, and then I realize 20 minutes later or 2 days later or the moment my wife points it out to me, I didn't say what they needed to say. I didn't say what they needed to hear the way they needed to hear it. I said what I needed to say the way I wanted to say it. You see the difference? It somehow became more about me than about building them up. I made it about me. Our goal is to make it about them, to listen to them, to know them, to become a student of them. So I'm not just saying what I need to say. And this is where Paul brings this all home in this passage. Here we go again. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen. Benefit. Our words need to benefit those who listen. So this is where it gets difficult, because what benefits someone might not always be easy to hear or say. We might need somebody to point out something that we're doing or not doing that is destructive to us, and we don't know it. Or it's destructive to us, and we do know it, but we're not sure anybody else knows it, and we need somebody who sees it to tell us something about it. Again, my wife Janet has had to have those conversations with me a few times over the years. One specifically about how I talk to our kids, or how I act when I'm around my brother. We revert to junior high age. Or how I act on vacation, or especially how I act on vacation with my brother. We have to have those kind of words and those kind of conversations, or hear them. And as we do, here's another important concept. Intent is as important as content. Intent is as important as content. We need to hear hard things, and we need to say hard things. And when we do, people pick up on our intent very quickly. In fact, they pick up on our intent before we say anything at all. Why? Well, because they already know us. We're talking about our inner circle of relationships. They know us. They know if we're going to say stuff for our own benefit or for their benefit. If it's going to be our agenda or something that will help them, they know it because they know us. And they know before we ever start our conversation, they know if we care, because they've seen us at our best. They've seen us at our worst. They know what motivates us. It's really hard to receive negative words or words we don't want to hear if we suspect somebody's intent. But when we know that they really have our best interest in mind, we can receive those words as something that will benefit us even when they're hard words. Well, that's the first of the three dynamics that we're looking at in this series. And the first of the three dynamics that play into every conversation we have, especially with the people that are closest to us. These are three things to take into consideration, because when others don't take them into consideration, we want them to. And when we don't, they want us to. The first dynamic is that words are not equally weighted. Negative words weigh way more than positive words. Let's say that one out loud together. Ready? Negative words weigh way more than positive words. And you've probably encountered this idea before too, right? All kinds of studies. And what the studies kind of average out to is that for every negative thing we hear, we need to hear 7 positive things, right? To balance that out so that we don't tip into just negative cynicism. So for every 7 good things for everyone, 7 positive things for every one negative thing. But here's the interesting observation of this is most of the studies and surveys that came up with the 7-to-1 ratio were done in marketplace or workplace environments and relationships. In family systems, it's a lot different. Some say that it's more like 25 positives need to be spoken for every 1 negative. 25-to-1 ratio. So in your marriage, with your kids, with your siblings, with your best friend, it's not a 7-to-1 anymore, it's 25-to-1. Positive to counterbalance the negative. And when we're talking negative, we're not talking like unwholesome things come out of our mouths. Just when you got to say a hard thing to somebody because you're trying to benefit them. Well, we got to understand this. So think about this and why this is important, because look at your past, and particularly your parental relationship, your relationship with your parents. When you think about the things that come to the surface of what they told you and taught you in life, there's a pretty good likelihood that the stuff you remember most is the negative stuff. And maybe that's not the case, and that's not the case for everybody. It's not the case for me. But for a lot of people, the things they remember are the negative things. The negatives, the critical, the cynical, the comparison, those areas that stuck and they're barbed in there and they created wounds, and maybe those wounds are still there for the rest of your life or at this point in your life. And every time you look in the mirror, you hear what that dad said, that mom said, that sister said, that brother said. Nobody else notices it, but it's all you can notice when you look in the mirror. Because words are heavy, words are weighted, and the negative words way outweigh the positives. I'll tell you a little bit about my story. My mom, because I was a Aaron the Wild child and had all the letters, ADHD, blah, 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 had all the stuff, my mom was constantly telling me, Aaron, you can do whatever you put your mind to. Aaron, you have what it takes. Aaron, you can do whatever you put your mind to. And she needed to say that because I had so many other voices, primarily teachers, other adults saying, and they would never say it, they would whisper it. You're not going to add up to anything. You are such a disappointment. You don't have it. And those negatives stuck with me. And my mom knew it, which I think is why so often she'd say, Aaron, you can do whatever you put your mind to. You have it. Negatives weigh more than the positives. Oh, and here's this little nugget. I almost hate to bring it up. Research suggests that fathers are significantly more prone to say negative things than mothers are. I don't know, do you think that's true? Dads, moms? Maybe, maybe not. Here's what research says. Fathers, number one, say fewer words than mothers, and more of those words are negative. That's your one word for the day. Andy Stanley suggests that the positive to negative ratio for dads and their kids should be more like 50 to 1, 50 positives for every one negative. And that may be a little extreme. I don't know, you may be thinking, that's a little extreme. And I'm no professional counselor, but I feel like I can say this with confidence. No one traces the roots of their problems back to too much encouragement, do they? You cannot overdose a person on encouragement as long as you're being sincere. And I just want to encourage all of you, whether it's at work or at home, in your neighborhood, let's overdose with a little bit more on construction and on encouragement. And for us dads, maybe it's a 50 to 1 ratio. So you put it all together by now. You don't even probably need me to sum all this up. But words are heavy. Negative words weigh way more than positive words. And if you're a Christian, if you're a Jesus follower, this is part of the equation. You don't get to choose what love looks like, and love looks like us measuring our words carefully. So between now and next time, I got a couple questions for you to think about. So if you want to get your cameras out, maybe take a picture of this, get your phones out, take a picture of this. And I see everyone who doesn't when I ask the question. I see when you don't take your picture out, or your camera out. Two things. Where do I have work to do on what we just talked about? Where do I personally have work to do? And who hopes you'll get to work soon? Who is hoping that you're going to get to work soon on this, because they're on the receiving end of your words, the people that are closest to you. Every conversation with those people in our inner circle is a construction zone, and your words are the materials that you use to build people up. And if you're a follower of Jesus, build it in the way of love. The way of love. And next week, we're going to see what that looks like in more detail in part 2 of the weight of your words. And for today, that's the good news. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.